Welcome, Bronco Nation, my game review for Boise State versus New Mexico. Boise State getting a big win on the blue versus New Mexico, a must-win game for them. They managed to get the big win 42-14 versus New Mexico to move to 500 so far in the season. One game away from bowl eligibility with major matchups versus Utah State and Air Force on the horizon. This was a big win for Boise State to not just win the game, but to win it dominantly and perhaps build some momentum coming into those big matchups down the road. We're going to look at the offense, the defense, and the special teams, grade each of these units, look how Boise State performed overall, and then we'll also grade the three keys to the game for Boise State, how they performed against my three keys to the game. So starting off with the offense, well, initially, first half, Boise State's offense comes out strong. They are working perfectly, or nearly perfectly. The extra time from Madsen in practice is showing off. His chemistry with his wide receivers are perfect. Right off the bat, in the first drive, he hits Austin Bolt for a deep 40-plus yard touchdown pass. Later in the half, he also hits Prince Strawn on what admittedly was a busted play defensively, but hits him on a deep 70-plus yard touchdown pass. He is on chemistry with his wide receivers. The flow of Madsen and Green in and out of the game makes a lot more sense. Green coming in for those goal line situations where his strength in the running game shows through. He and also on third down and short type situations, Boise State's offense running the way that it could have been running this entire time and the way that I've been calling for it to run this entire time. We have no idea why they chose to wait this long to run it this way, but we're finally getting to see Boise State's offense running in a way that makes sense, and the offense running to its full potential with Maddox Madsen at the starting quarterback, the pocket passing guy who's got some legs on him too, but the passing quarterback in a system that is built around a passing quarterback and not primarily around a run-based QB. Finally, the offense is hitting its full stride. 202 yards passing in the first half, 32 points in the first half of this game. 2 deep touchdowns. Maddox Madsen's on fire. 6 of 11 for 202 yards and 2 touchdowns. Also, Boise State's got a 2-point conversion. The offense is flowing. This looks like it's going to be not just a blowout for Boise State when they're crushing this team offensively, but it also looks like it's going to be a way for Maddox Madsen to solidify himself in this fantastic entrance onto the blue as the official starter for Boise State moving forward. And then the unthinkable happens. Maddox Madsen on a scramble, which he's done dozens of times throughout the season. It was not a designed run. It was a scramble trying to make something happen with his legs after the passing play broke down. Ends up getting hurt. And folks, I've torn my ACL. I'm not saying it's a torn ACL. It could be some other torn leg type injury, maybe an MCL, but that looked bad. That he came out at he couldn't walk to the sideline. He had to be assisted off the sideline. He came out with the leg brace. I've worn that leg brace, the massive, big old lock it all in place leg brace. He's definitely out for the season. That is a major knee injury, and 100% praying for Maddox Madsen and his family in this very difficult time. But the unthinkable happens. Maddox Madsen gets hurt after that performance, and you hate to see it for a player that he was rising. This was his time to shine, and he was showing that finally the faith put in him by the coaching staff that should have been put in him many games earlier, finally put the faith in him that he deserved. He's given his opportunity. He is not blowing it. He is stepping up to the plate in the way that we knew that he would, and he hurts himself like this. Maddox Madsen gets hurt. Boise State in the second half only puts up 10 points offensively. They only have 48 yards passing overall. Boise State focuses on the run game, and they're able to run New Mexico out of town at that point. Boise State's defense plays much better in the second half. We'll talk about that. But Boise State able to step up and make this a convincing win overall. But a lot of question marks do remain. Can Taylor Green run this offense effectively? His passing was good there in the second half. But it's also versus a New Mexico defense that is not good. They are terrible. They're the one... New Mexico has a lot of issues, but that's one of the things that I mentioned in my game preview that's been holding them back. They've had a good quarterback who coincidentally didn't come to this game. He was sick, but they've had a good quarterback that's given them chances in games, but their defense has lost them the majority of their matchups. And this is not a defense that you're testing your strength against. This is a defense that's giving up 35 points per game coming into this, and any quarterback should be able to play well against them. Now, having said that, Taylor Green was throwing well against this defense. We'll have to see, does that continue? However, one question mark, well, there's still question marks on whether Taylor Green can run this offense the way that it's designed effectively. The major question mark on who's going to be the starting quarterback for Boise State has been answered, unfortunately. Not the way that we thought that it would. We thought that would be answered by one quarterback stepping up clearly and defining the role for themselves. And that was happening. Maddox Madsen had clearly shown that he deserved to be the starter for this team. Unfortunately, an injury has now decided that for the remainder of the season, Taylor Green is the starting quarterback for this team. And you know what? Without that pressure of wondering whether or not he was going to get pulled if he made a bad play, he definitely looked like he was playing much looser in this game. He had 63 yards, 5 of 6 for 63 yards, and he also managed to rush 5 of 27 for a touchdown. His throws looked a lot cleaner. He didn't hit every one, but he hit most of them. And he even had some bad throws where bad footwork. He's still throwing off his back foot, but he still made those throws happen and got them to the receiver in a spot where the receiver could get it because he's playing with that confidence, which has been missing all season because he knew one big step up and he's yanked from the field. That's what happens to a two-quarterback system. Neither quarterback is going to play with confidence. That's why Maddox Madsen hasn't looked 100% out there either, despite the fact that we know he's capable of that, and he showed it in this game because the two quarterback rotations kept throwing him off. Well, in this game, unfortunately, Maddox Madsen out almost definitely for the season. I don't have any official injury report. I don't know exactly what his injury is, and I'm hoping that it's just an aggravated sprain, but that did not look like a sprain. That looked like a major knee injury that's probably going to keep him out the rest of the season. So the story of this game now became Taylor Green, and he looked good coming to this half. Can he maintain that momentum now versus Utah State? Are we going to see the Taylor Green of last season, or are we going to see the Taylor Green that we've seen so far for the majority of this season that looks inconsistent in this offense? That question mark now continues to stay with this program. That will only be answered in the next matchup versus Utah State, which again becomes another must-win game because of the difficulties that Boise State traditionally has versus Air Force, and an Air Force team that is good overall, even if they did just lose to Hawaii. I have no way of explaining that. But Boise State is going to struggle to stop Air Force because they always do versus the option, and this has, for the majority of the season, been a good Air Force team. So Boise State, Taylor Green stepping up, like I said, played well. He only missed one pass, only 63 yards passing, but he didn't really have to throw in the second half. There was the indication, at least, that was there, that if he needed to throw in the second half, he could have. Not a lot of deep completions. It was kind of bailed out on a pass to Holani, who got the ball moving downfield for him on a long run. But the indications were there that he could at least start hitting those passes more consistently and getting on track with his receivers. Talking about these receivers, you lose your number one wide receiver. There is no more Eric McAllister on this roster. He's gone. So who steps up? Well, I thought that it was going to be Penry, but he is out. He was injured. Not something I was tracking. Cobbs was tracking his injury. He's out for the season. That is announced. But Penry, I did not know that he was injured for this game. He was one of my key players for this matchup, and I don't think that was announced prior to the game. Maybe right before the game, but not something that I think people were tracking because he was playing well in the second half of last week's game. So Penry steps up, and who I thought would step up, he's out. So who steps up for Boise State? Well, the answer is the young guys. The guys we knew had that talent potential and definitely were playing really, really well with Maddox Madsen out there. Now, with Taylor Green out there, again, they didn't have to pass that much in the second half. Taylor Green seemed to be throwing well to Billy Bowens. That seemed to be one of his primary targets out there. He was still completing passes to Strawn. Believe he still had a throw to Bolt. But those guys really were stepping up in the Maddox Madsen offense. Prince Strawn, 3 receptions for 128 yards. Helped that he had that 74-yard blown defensive play in the touchdown, but he was playing really, really well. Also had a brilliant play on the right side of the field, which was just a beautiful pitch and catch, keeping his feet in bounds just long enough to make the completion on what was just a perfect catch on his part. Austin Bolt looked amazing, continued his trend from last week where we finally got to see him in action, showing that he's a speedster that fans knew that he was. And then Billy Bowens had 3 receptions for 35 yards, and then Holani also added 2 receptions for 43 yards. So playmakers stepping up. But again, most of those yards, 202 of those yards were with Maddox Madsen. Now the question has to be, what are we going to see versus Utah State, who's a much better defense, and also with Taylor Green? Again, it's going to be a very interesting game preview, so make sure you watch that. Make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss out on that. But it's going to be a very interesting game preview discussing what that will look like versus a Utah State defense is definitely going to present a much tougher challenge. But it was good to see those guys finally stepping up because Boise State really hasn't had a second guy. They had Eric McAllister. He caught, when you take out running backs, the main, Genty and Holani, he had 52% of the receiving yards for this team. And there really wasn't a second guy on the roster that was stepping up consistently. Are one of these two that next man up? Is it Prince Strawn? I think a lot of people think he has that capability to be. Still, obviously, a very young player, as is Austin Bolt. But can these guys now stay consistent and continue to be that reliable threat, 1-2 threat for Boise State through the last couple games of the season here, again, versus defenses that are going to be much, much tougher to break. Now, the story of the second half, though, again, wasn't the passing game. It was the running game. Boise State, very, very good overall in the running game in this matchup. 219 yards rushing. Holani, again, stepping over 16 carries for 95 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a 5.9-yard average. Everybody, somehow, I don't know how this happened, but I feel like everybody forgot that Holani is Holani. Before Genty came into the picture, George Holani was the talk of as one of the great backs in Boise State history. A lot of injuries had sidelined him, but he has a very different playmaking style than any other Boise State back that I've ever seen. Other Boise State backs had their own unique style, but Holani combines the shiftiness and agility of some of the smaller backs with the power running of an Ajayi sometimes. He is a combination of so many different running backs that it's impossible to categorize him with any other back. When I talk about running backs in the future, I will compare them situationally, potentially, to Holani. He's going to be one of my backs. My backs that I usually compare as a baseline of this was a type of back for Boise State is, obviously Ian Johnson, Jay Ajayi, Doug Martin, Jeremy McNichols, because those guys stood out as very unique backs for Boise State. George Holani is going to be one of those guys. If another guy comes along with these set of skills, he's going to be compared to George Holani because he just is an incredible running back with he's not a very big guy, but he has an incredible dynamic that is not matched by a lot of other players in college football or in Boise State's history. And he is stepping up again. He's coming back from injury. He's coming back strong. The question, as we asked, he obviously is playing with full head of steam and he's trying to finish off the season well, but he obviously didn't achieve what he wanted to this year. Does he come back next season? Mike Prater threw out this point, which was something we knew coming into the season, that George Holani has one more year if he wants to use it because of the COVID season and all that. He has a super senior year. He could come back if he wanted to. The expectation was he was going to come back for this year and then leave for the draft, but he's been injured, and I don't think he's on a lot of draft charts right now just because of the fact that he hasn't played very much. So we could definitely see George Holani coming back next season, and the way that he is finishing this year proves that he's not lost his step at all. He is still the same dynamic, explosive, incredible, one of the best backs in Boise State history that he has been every game of his career leading up to this season. And unfortunately, if it hadn't been for an injury, I think we would have seen one of the most incredible duos in Boise State history pulling off major numbers together, which is what the plan was with Genty and Holani. So, unfortunately, Genty's out with injury, still out, hasn't come back. So who's at number 2 for Boise State? Well, it's Dubar, Jean-Bray Dubar. I was advocating for him to get more playing time. I said Jean-Bray Dubar needs to be getting, 7 or 10 touches a game. I would say 10 touches is probably the safe spot that you need to be seeing with Jean-Bray Dubar with what he can contribute. He's definitely your next elite running back. Nothing against Dudley, nothing against Crow, but Dubar is that next level type back that we saw in Genty, that you see in Holani. Dubar is that next level potential, and he's shown it in short spurts. He needs to get more playing time. Well, he did in this game. 15 carries, so 5 more than what I was advocating for. 15 carries for 91 yards, 6.1 yard average. A lot of those carries coming in the second half as he wore down this New Mexico defense. He is showing that he deserves to continue to tote that rock. But Boise State spreading the load around in the running game. You had Holani with his carries, then Dubar, both of those backs are averaging about the same amount of carries there, 16 for Holani, 15 for Dubar. Green with his carries in the running game, and then Dudley, kind of being used in a Devin Demas kind of role as a speedster on the quick sweeps. He had 2 carries for 19 yards, and he looked good on the runs that he had. So Boise State's got a lot of weapons in its backfield, which we always knew, which again is why we thought that Boise State would come out with a run-focused RPO-type offense that would utilize all these players to the maximum potential. maybe we see that next week with the fact that you've now lost your passing quarterback that you knew was able to run this offense effectively. The answer for Boise State is right there in front of them. They just have to find a way to utilize it. Taylor Green and this even with Genty out, this trio of running backs, Lonnie, Dubar, and even Dudley out there, at least that duo plus Green, plus these speedsters in the receiving game, you have a potential here to do something incredible with this roster if it's managed correctly. But you have to work off of the strength of that offense, of that roster, which is the running game. You have to build your offense off of that and let everything else come as it comes from that offense. Let the running game set up the passing game. Let the option offense set up the quick passing game to the outside, using the RPO to suck the defense down and open things up over the top. What Boise State's trying to do right now is run a traditional Boise State offense, which is balanced attack, deep throws, medium passing game, and a steady running game from the running back. That's great if you have Maddox Madsen. You don't. You now have Green. He is the starter. He's your guy. You don't have any other options. There's no one coming to save the day when Green's not able to handle this offense because it's not built for him. Something has to change so that Green can continue to be effective in this offense. Your offense can continue to be effective with Maddox Madsen now going down because he is a major loss. I know he hasn't been the established starter, but he's been the guy that's been keeping Boise State in games late, who's been holding them through, that's been getting them wins when they didn't necessarily deserve to get wins. He has been the guy that's been giving you that spark, keeping games within, as Andy Avalos likes to say, a possession. Maddox Madsen's the reason those games have been that close because he's been running the offense effectively because it's built for him. So, do we see a change? A lot of question marks. I mean, this game answered nothing. It would have answered everything if Maddox Madsen had walked away from it. But because he doesn't, now all the question marks that have plagued this entire season come rushing back. And we don't know what this team's going to look like next week versus a Utah State team that can go either way. I mean, Utah State can play well, they can play poorly. We don't know what this team's going to look like. But what we do know is that there are playmakers on this roster that can step up if put in the right situation. And that's what we saw today with Strawn and Bolt. And Dubar stepping up, Alani, and even Green coming into the situation and playing well in the passing game. So we know that this team has playmakers. It's just, can the coaching staff properly handle them? Now, talking about the coaching staff and handling playmakers correctly, let's look at this defense, because this Boise State defense was definitely a tale of two halves. And if you look at what New Mexico did to themselves, New Mexico could have made this game a lot closer. Now, consider the fact that New Mexico's starting quarterback, the entire soul of this offense, the reason New Mexico has had a chance at all this year, Dylan Hopkins didn't travel with the team because he was sick. Almost 2,000 yards passing. Dylan Hopkins didn't travel with the game because he was sick. So it came down to the true freshman for New Mexico, who had never passed for what he passed for today. I believe his longest passing in a game had been like 60 yards or something like that. It was like 50 or 60 yards. Only a couple passes here and there. Very situational as a running quarterback. He now comes in and takes the rock. And New Mexico, Boise State's defense made him look like a seasoned veteran out there. In the first half, Boise State's not bringing any pressure. They're letting him pick them apart. 9 of 10 for 147 yards passing and 46 yards rushing. Honestly, New Mexico, if they hadn't shot themselves in the foot, if they hadn't fumbled a ball on really what was a very dumb play, the running back, he was getting tackled. He didn't secure the ball. He tried to basically throw the defender to the ground with the arm that had the ball in it. And the defender, as he's going to the ground, says, well, thank you. I'll take that with me, and pulled it out of his arms right at the goal line. So that's 7 points off the board. And then they miss a field goal. So right there, that's 10 points off the board for New Mexico at the end of the first half and the first drive of the second half. 10 points that New Mexico doesn't get. If they're able to convert that touchdown and convert that field goal, then coming late into the third quarter, it's a 27 to 32 point game. It's only a 5-point spread. This game maybe goes very differently. Boise State maybe has to come out with a little bit of a different approach offensively. There's a little bit more pressure on them. New Mexico's defense feels like they have a chance that, New Mexico's offense is staying on the field longer because they're not playing from desperation. New Mexico's defense now has a chance to maybe be a little bit more rested. Doesn't feel like the entire weight of the game is on their shoulders. They don't get crushed and run over by Boise State perhaps. And Boise State and New Mexico come down to a much closer score, maybe closer to what I was projecting, at least spread-wise, throughout the rest of that game. However, New Mexico, with a true freshman, not him, but the rest of the team, making mistakes, and obviously Boise State able to pull away from this game in the second half. But defensively, this was not a great performance for the defense. 323 yards overall, 200 yards passing and 123 yards rushing. Again, from a true freshman quarterback who is not their passing quarterback. This is a true freshman, very much not non-seasoned kind of guy who is not a passing thrower, who is their running threat quarterback, having to go out there, and he was able to pick apart this defense with ease. And a big part of that was because of Boise State's scheme. And I don't understand why they did this. If the game plan was to come in against Dylan Hopkins, you would think, because he's not a runner and because his primary strength is in the passing game, his primary strength is his arm, that you would want to blitz him like you did effectively versus Fresno State when you finally decided to do that, and like you did effectively the game before that with Wyoming. Boise State, when they blitz, they stop the ball most of the time. But they don't. The first half of this game, they barely blitzed at all. They got one sack in a great kick for Boise State that had New Mexico down. I think it was a kickoff for Boise State, and then there was some false starts, some penalties, and they had New Mexico down the goal line, and so they were able to get a great sack there that put New Mexico way back. But they only had really one sack in the first half. And it was kind of more of a situational-based play. But beyond that, Mexico was picking them apart because they weren't bringing the blitz. In the second half, Boise State says, okay, you know what, now we're going to bring the blitz. And they brought in 2 more sacks and 7 tackles for loss. Now, a couple of those were in the first half. I wasn't able to capture the stat line at the first half, so I'm not sure exactly how many tackles for loss from the first and second half. But most of those tackles for loss came in the second half, and the quarterback was clearly flustered. He was running for his life back there, didn't know what to do with the ball because Boise State finally put pressure on him. And the question has to be, why do you come in with that game plan? You're going to face Dylan Hopkins. You know that the blitz works and that your secondary is weak versus a quarterback who has time to throw and is calm and collected in the pocket. So why is your plan not to come in with the blitz versus him? Now, if your plan was to come in with the blitz versus Dylan Hopkins, and now you see they've got their running quarterback out there, why do you change the game plan after that? Okay, maybe you change the game plan because you see a different quarterback, but why? Why do you change the game plan? That quarterback for New Mexico is a true freshman. Yeah, he's their running quarterback, but he's still a true freshman. He is not going to react well in a pocket that is closing in on him. He's going to make mistakes. He almost threw a pick in the second half. He's going to make mistakes. Why don't you continue to press him like you did in the second half? That game plan worked. That second half game plan is what Boise State should have come in the first half. So I am happy that the adjustments were made, but I don't understand why they weren't the game plan to begin with. I mean, is Boise State baiting the offense? Are they trying to, keep them in the game? I don't understand why Boise State is coming in consistently throughout the season with these very two different game plans. And yes, part of it is that Boise State's defensive coaches are doing a good job of adjusting, which props to them because that's not something we've necessarily seen consistently in previous Boise State teams. But the question is, why are they having to adjust if they just came in with the game plan which works, which is blitz the quarterback? That's really the only thing that saved the secondary all season. At the beginning of the game, they wouldn't have any problems. So I don't know what's going on there with the Boise State defense. It was very much a very disappointing first half for Boise State. Like I said, 147 yards passing given up. In the second half, with the blitz, with the proper pressure applied, only 53 yards passing, no more points allowed, and a much better performance overall. Obviously, by Boise State, this is a defensive blowout for them, but again, most of that was because of the second half performance. They had some great playmakers step up. Shea Oladipo, 7 tackles, 3 tackles for loss. Great game for him. I mean, he had a really great play on a screen pass where he just blew past the blockers and made a really big hit in the backfield. Andrew Simpson, 4 tackles. He was credited for a half sack and for a half tackle for loss. And then Jake Ripp stepping up. This is a name that hasn't been called very much this season. He has recorded stats in 2 other games, but he stepped up in this one, had 4 tackles, filling in for the injured Marco Notarani, which, by the way, there are a ton of Boise State players out for this game, defensively and offensively. Obviously, you had Cobbs and Genty and Penry, but then also Riley Smith was out. Ty Benesfield, who has been one of the highlights of the season for this defense in the safety position, he was out for this game. Tyler Weegis, the transfer of Boston College, he was out. Dimitri Washington, obviously one of the captains of this team on the defensive line, he was out. Marco Notarani, Misa, and now Matson. I mean, something's going on with Boise State where the injuries are racking up, and I don't know enough about what's going on with the team to be able to focus on them. Maybe it's all circumstantial, but something's going on that a lot of injuries are being caused on this roster. And that's definitely something that Boise State, this coaching staff should look at. But definitely concerning to see so many, not just, I mean, these aren't like special teams guys, not like, primary special teams like field goal kicker. No disrespect to special teams, but what I'm saying is these aren't like your second or third string guys that you're putting out on like a kick return or something to go block or to go get the kick return. I mean, these are your primary starters in your primary offensive and defensive positions. Some of these, and that's a major hit on this roster this late in the season. So Boise State's really taken a beating this year, as obviously record wise and in so many other areas. But coming late in the season, obviously the defense is. The losses defensively and offensively are starting to mount, and we'll have to see again. Like I said, none of this game is not answering anything for Boise State. If anything, only more question marks are being applied, and the question mark has to be how are some of these mounting injuries defensively. I mean, those are big names that I named off, especially the loss of Notarani, Dimitri Washington, and Benesfield coming into teams like Utah State and Air Force versus a New Mexico team that has a young quarterback out there and isn't a good program offensively overall. Without their primary quarterback, you can make up for some of those losses. But how are those losses going to impact Boise State versus Utah State and Air Force, who have much more competent offenses, especially Air Force? Those are going to be major question marks that we're going to have to look at in the next couple of weeks. So it's going to be an interesting end to the season for sure for Boise State. But defensively overall, second half made up for it. They're going to get a B. But I'm going to give them a B minus because I'm very upset that they didn't come in with that game plan in the first half and allowed this game to be as close as it was and potentially come down to New Mexico hurting themselves to allow Boise State to pull away. Again, if New Mexico doesn't make these mistakes, doesn't hurt themselves, allows themselves to score, allows themselves to score the field goal and the touchdown, then potentially this is a much closer game, and the defense really has to work hard in the second half to make up for their errors in the first half. Luckily, New Mexico made errors enough that Boise State's own defensive mistakes weren't highlighted, but this could have been a much different game defensively. So overall for the defense, B minus. I realize I didn't grade the offense. Overall, great performance for the offense. In the first half, second half, even with the loss of Maddox Matson, adjusting the game plan to be more run focused, and that was partially because of the overall score. So I'm going to give the offense a solid A as well. 42 points, good passing, good rushing. So defense B minus, offense A. For special teams for Boise State, we'll review this real quick and look at the three keys to the game, and then we'll be done. But special teams for Boise State, Jonah Dalmez, 2 of 2 for 44 yards. Really, wasn't needed out there today because of the spread, but he was given an opportunity to continue to hone his game, and he is going to be a needed member when you're talking about narrow margins versus Utah State and Air Force. So it's good when you have a game that you're blowing the other team out, that the coach still allows the field goal unit to go out and have its playing time. I mean, Boise State could have gone for a fourth and short type situation. Situationally, it was there. They could have gone for it. But I think we saw from Andy Avalos a real attempt to go out and work on special teams. Obviously, this has been an issue for Boise State. Not the kicking side of things, but the snapping of the ball and the hold and the blocking, just the unit overall, aside from Jonah Dalmez, has been an issue for Boise State. So it really seemed like an intentional effort by Andy Avalos that I liked for Boise State to go out and work and hone its special teams game and get its 2 kicks off. And then James Ferguson Reynolds, I was afraid we weren't really going to see him today, especially after the way that Boise State started. Obviously, he had that first early kick, but I like seeing James Ferguson Reynolds out there. Now, obviously, you don't like seeing him out there because it means that the offense had to punt. But on the other hand, he's one of the best players on this roster, and he has been flawless this season. He is having the most exceptional punting game season I have ever seen by a Boise State player and probably any college football player ever. So it's almost a shame when Boise State never has to punt. And so late in the game, I was kind of hoping that they would actually have they didn't need the points. They didn't need to keep going down and scoring. I was kind of hoping that they'd have at least one drive stall out, and then they did. They ran it like 3 or 4 times, something like that, and they had a stalled out drive. It's like, all right, finally get to see James Ferguson Reynolds again. And he goes out and he nails a beautiful punt. Oh my goodness, a 55-yard punt that he trickled out of bounds at the 3-yard line while under pressure from New Mexico. I just do not have enough words for the job that James Ferguson Reynolds is doing. We are watching one of the most elite punters in the country. Again, punters don't get enough love and they don't get enough focus, But maybe this season, with the way that things have gone and the way that the record overall and the issues with the quarterback game and the running back, maybe some of that can be looked at in a positive light, because it's meant that players like James Ferguson Reynolds, who are exceptional athletes, have been allowed to have their moment in the sun. I mean, fans are looking for something positive to lock onto, and James Ferguson Reynolds gives them that positivity, and he's getting the recognition that he deserves, and that's wonderful and fantastic to see, because he definitely deserves it. Another fantastic game for him. Yeah, under 50 yards average, but 47-yard average and a 55-yard punt that went out for a 3. Just perfect. Overall, for Boise State in the kick return game, they didn't allow any major kick returns or punt returns, and improvement for versus Fresno State, obviously. Dudley had looked okay out there again. He has no kick returner, or no returner in general, has looked elite for Boise State since Khalil Shakir, honestly. But Dudley looked good on the first return of the game, and he looked okay out there. Boise State's still looking to find either the blocking scheme or the returner that's going to make that unit elite again. And then Boise State's punting return game has taken a beating this season, because you started off with Helani out there, and then Helani got hurt, and then when he came back, they were like, you know what, let's not put him out there because he got hurt when he was out there on punt returns. Then Cobbs was the punt returner, then Cobbs is hurt, then Penry was the punt returner, but now Penry's hurt, so I mean, you're into your fourth punt returner at this point, and it's Cole Wright. He did a great job. No major returns, but he had some nice catches, including one that if he hadn't caught, would have trickled much further down the field. So nice job out there overall for the returning. So special teams overall is going to get an A. Solid A performance by them overall, and really nothing to complain about special teams-wise. So really wrapping up here, last thing, 3 keys to the game for Boise State. How did they do? Number 1, fans have got to show up. You did. Bronco Nation, chaos flag raised by Mike Sanford. Love to see it. Boise State showed up and showed why you want to play here, because Bronco Nation, they are the major reason that players love this place so much. I mean, the blue turf is cool, and the facilities are awesome, and you get to play in typically an exciting offense, and that you get eyes on you and all of that. But like I said, any player that I talk to, what they remember is the fan base. The reason the blue is special is because of you, Bronco Nation, and you showed up today despite a roster not a roster, but a team that is not doing what you typically want out of a Boise State team record-wise. You still showed up and showed these players why the ones that are still here, still putting in the work, should stay with Boise State and continue to work towards building a brighter future for this team, because that future is bright as long as Bronco Nation is committed to this program, and you show that commitment is unwavering despite the record overall. So A+ overall for the fans showing up. Enforce the run for Boise State. Yes, I'm going to give that a solid A, especially in the second half. Boise State's offensive line, New Mexico had no answer for Boise State in the second half. They were able to run it down their throats, like 4 or 5 passing attempts, and that's it. Boise State able to dominate New Mexico in the run game. So solid A in the run, enforce the run, and then develop the future. A+. Boise State's future was certainly developed here in the receiving game, also in the running game. Boise State could have just gone out there with Helani the majority of the time, but they didn't. They were intentionally giving reps to Dudley. They were intentionally giving reps to Dubar. They were intentionally trying to spread that ball around to some of these younger players. So, and on defense, seeing some faces, partially because of injury, but also because Boise State knows they have playmakers and they're trying to get these guys looks. So Boise State definitely trying to develop the future, because you don't know who that next player in the unfortunately age of NIL, and especially when you're not doing what Boise State teams typically do, you don't know when that next player is going to potentially leave, and so you want all the players on your roster to be able to play at an elite level, and giving them this kind of experience is highly beneficial. So that's it. That's the review video. Boise State doing well to get this win, but again, this is the win we expected. Not necessarily the way that we expected. Nice, big, dominant score is nice to see for a Boise State team that hasn't had a lot of those so far this season. But Boise State's got some big tests versus Utah State and Air Force. And if it right now, obviously, technically Boise State could still get to a Mountain West Championship game. Again, it's not in their control right now, but technically they could still do that. But in the grand scheme of things, the ultimate season goals that you aim for Boise State are mostly gone. Mountain West Championship still technically achievable, not likely, but achievable. But that's probably gone, and you're not right now consciously probably thinking you're going to that. A bowl game is still out there, but it's not the New Year's Six. It's going to be some minor level bowl game. For Bronco Nation as a fan base, obviously, we only think about the New Year's Six. players somewhat more about the normal bowl games, but still for them, they want to achieve the highest level of success for Boise State, and that means 10-plus win seasons, Mountain West Championship, New Year's Six type contention. And Boise State's just not in that conversation right now. But what you're doing right now is you're showing that there's still hope in this team. Regardless of who's coaching, regardless of who's on this roster, regardless of who's left on this roster, who leaves this roster, there's still hope for this team, and you're building for 2024. Getting wins like this versus New Mexico in dominant fashion shows that you are building something for next season. The rest of this year is about building a future platform that Boise State can springboard into 2024, which is the all-important year for the Group of Five when the playoffs finally become a reality that they can access. So for Boise State right now, they have everything still to play for because they're playing for 2024 right now, and they are playing right now to set themselves up for the playoffs. So while it might seem like there's not much to play for this season, there is everything is on the line right now as Boise State goes to take on Utah State and Air Force. If they can run through the rest of this season and push through and build something that they can then launch off of for 2024, we could see a different trajectory for this program. So continue to support this team, continue to come out to these games, continue to show up for this program, as many as are left, and continue to root on this team because again, while I still believe that change is necessary at the head coaching position, and nothing that happened in this game changed that perspective. You know, Andy Avalos finally ran the right offensive system, but why did it take this long? And again, he's now forced into a position where he doesn't have a choice. He's got to start Taylor Green, kind of like, you know, he was forced to put Helani out there as the number one running back versus kind of running a shuffle rotation that wasn't necessarily using both backs effectively either. So, you know, situations are determining his coaching right now versus him taking the leading role that he's supposed to and run this program in the direction that he's supposed to. And all the reasons that everything that happened in the Memphis game didn't change. Everything that happened in the San Jose State game that we almost lost and the players were able to win didn't change. The reason we lost the Colorado State game and Fresno State game, none of those losses changed because Boise State gets a win. However, right now, Boise State showing that there are playmakers still left on this roster, and there's still a lot left for this team to play for. And regardless of whether or not Andy Avalos should be a part of this team moving forward or not, there is still a lot for this fan base to support, and it is vital that this fan base continue to support this team, regardless of who is at the coaching position, to set this team up for success for 2024. So thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure you like, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, go Big Blue!